Now if you're looking for Sony FX6 hacks, you've came to the right place, and we're going to start with number 1. Keep all sharp objects away from your camera at all times because it looks absolutely ridiculous. Alright, but seriously, today's video is going to be about some hidden gems about the Sony FX6 that you might not have known, and I'm just going to call them hacks for the sake of this video. Alright, so the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be the kind of crappy white balancing tool on the Sony FX6. Unfortunately, you're going to have that gray card take up the majority of your screen in order to grab a proper balance. And if you're using wider angle lenses, it becomes a lot more difficult than it sounds. However, you can use clear image zoom, which is a feature on the side and top handle of the Sony FX6, so you can get a little bit more reach and start to punch in more of your frame to actually capture more of that 18% gray card so you can get an accurate white balance. Now, if you shoot documentary or sports, then there's one hidden jutsu about this camera that you might really like. No, not that one. But it's going to be picture cache recording. Now, picture cache recording might be a little bit difficult to explain, but what it ends up doing is the camera actually records up to a 30-second loop before you actually press the record button. That way, if you are pointing your camera, you do have the proper composition and either you forgot to or you thought you missed a moment, the camera's actually pre-recording 30 seconds before in order for you to capture that and never miss a shot. Now, this is going to be great for sports shooters and documentary shooters, so you don't miss a big play or a big moment, and as long as your camera's pointed to the thing that you wanted to capture in the first place, you're actually going to have a safety valve in terms of making sure that you get your shot. And at this point, I hope you guys know what focus racking is, and that just means that you're going to focus for something that's near to something that might be far away. But what if I told you you could also rack your depth of field on the Sony FX6? And it actually works in conjunction with the built-in ND filter, so as you're changing your aperture, changing your depth of field, using the ND filter to balance the exposure, you're actually able to rack things that are going to be in focus from near to far and keeping everything in between in focus at the same time. Now, this one is a little bit tricky because at some point you will start to underexpose your image, and I actually don't see this feature used too much, but if you do find something that this is really helpful for, using bokeh control on the Sony FX6 is something that makes your shots look a little bit more unique. Now, I actually can't take credit for this one, and this is from a commenter on the first part of this video and some of the settings that I change and adjust on the Sony FX6. Now, the Sony FX6, you could one tap on the S and Q button in order to change from normal motion into slow motion, something that you FX9 users just wouldn't know about. However, instead of going to the menus and changing things up and then using the one touch button, if you press and hold on the S and Q button on the Sony FX6, a little menu is going to pop up where you can actually adjust the frame rate that you want to slow motion to right there in the camera without having to go through any menus. Now, this is going to come in clutch and be really handy, especially if I have to change between different slow motion modes on the day and I don't want to have to go back into my settings and go looking around to make sure whether or not I'm shooting in 60 frames a second, 120, or anything in between. Now, next we're going to talk about going in RAW. Getting into ProRes RAW is something that you can do via the Atomos Ninja 5 recorder as long as you have some space on your SSD drive. Now, you can record in RAW via HDMI, but something you might want to do is also make sure that you're toggling on the XAVCI at the same time. That way you not only have a backup, but if you're working with clients where you're delivering projects right away, in ProRes RAW or even using regular ProRes, you can just offload the drive from the SSD, give that right to your client, and you have a backup of some XAVCI footage, which is really high in quality, that you can store on your drives as a backup, or you can just edit different types of footage from that as well. Now, this one probably has a name that makes a little bit more sense, but I'm just gonna call it the clip flag button. Now, sometimes when you're shooting corporate events or interviews or different sports takes, and you wanna make sure that you're actually flagging down the takes that you want to use in your final edit, you can do that by pressing the little flag button that's located on the top of your camera. Now, when you go through all of your clips in your thumbnail viewer, you can make some soft selects on what images or which clips you actually want to keep for your final edit without having to go through your editing software to figure all of that out. This is a feature that might get a little bit overlooked as we're concerned with S-Log3 and built-in NDs and stuff like that, but having the ability to confirm your favorite shots on set makes your editing process that much easier. Now, this one you might have to map yourself, but a feature that I always have on my Sony FX6 is the review last clip button. Now, I actually map this to my top handle, but the way that this works is that I could review the last clip that I took, which comes in handy when I'm working on client projects. Now, one thing I don't like is having somebody over my shoulder asking me how everything's looking while I'm shooting all the time. Now, in conjunction with my wireless monitoring setup, when I get a shot that I'm really excited about or I want to confirm whether or not that's the right way I'm supposed to do something, I can use a wireless monitor setup in a quick menu setting that I can go to the last clip I just took in order to show my clients or anybody else that's on set for review. And lastly, this is how you're gonna be able to import LUTs into your Sony FX6. Step 1, you're gonna head over to my website and you're gonna pick up my new latest LUT pack for S-Log3 footage. Number 2 is you're gonna drag and drop all the cube files into the LUT folder into your SD card. Next thing you have to do is insert your SD card in slot B. If it's in slot A, it's just not going to work. Then when you go to your settings, you're gonna go to paint/look, you're gonna go to import, find an empty space, and you're going to import the LUTs from the SD card and card slot B over into your camera. Now you can see how all the color grades are going to look before you put anything into your computer and start to grade. And on top of that, it doesn't damage any of your footage, so it's not a baked-in look, it's just a preview of what your footage is going to look like using some of the LUTs in my pack. Now that might be a little bit of a plug-in, honestly, I'm not saying sorry for it, but I hope you guys like this video and you learned some things that you might not have known about the Sony FX6. Now at this point, I feel like I've pretty much taught everything I possibly can teach about this camera. However, if there's anything that you know that I haven't mentioned in pretty much any of these videos, drop it down in the comment section below, but also be nice, because if you're not, neither will I. But if you guys want to see another video, the YouTube algorithm already has you covered, because they think that you're actually gonna like that one. So I'll see you there. Peace.